I'm going to use the opportunity right now, while we're talking about sort of like the financial sector, to introduce our finance initiative. And I'm actually going to start with inviting our next two sort of advisors, partners, Alan and Pat. If you guys could maybe just introduce yourselves.
Hi, Pat McCarty here. Longtime lawyer, former general counsel at the CFTC, worked for the chairman at the SEC, been very involved in swaps, futures, securities, hedge funds, the financial services sector for the last 30 years. If there's one thing that's very clear, the financial services sector, if there's a chance to make some money on something, they will try to do it. On to you, Alan. I'm not sure if we've got Alan.
He's on. Alan, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about the. Yeah, thank you for including me today. I really appreciate being part of this effort, and I'm excited about the opportunities. A lot like Pat, we're both in Washington D.C., and we kind of balance each other out on the political spectrum, which is always good. I too have been involved in public affairs and public policy work in the financial regulated space for 30 years, and also the corresponding congressional committees that provide the oversight for these regulators.
Hey, great, thanks. So, hey, just to tee up a little bit of the discussion with you guys. We've talked a lot about companies, what they can do with their data, what they are doing in terms of what the opportunities are for data assets, that sort of thing. So what is it that that you guys really see in this space?
Lydian is doing some really exciting things with data. And one of the most provocative questions that I've heard in the recent past is, can companies monetize the data which they own and hold, which they really can't do today? Alan and I have talked about this, and we believe, why not? I mean, I think that there are actually some instances of people selling data that they have, but it's not nearly as widespread as it probably ought to be. Intellectual property rights, like trademarks, patents, copyrights, clearly have value. Major companies have significant inventory of market and customer data, which other companies and investors would be very interested in. So what financial instruments could unlock the value of a company's data? We can envision the creation of data futures and swaps contracts in addition to other financial instruments. Futures and swaps contracts can help market participants with price discovery, what are those assets worth, as well as hedging some of the expense and cost of basically producing those assets.
Yeah, I might. Just one thing I would like to really point out, and it's somewhat of a restatement of what Pat just said in one way. But Arka, you mentioned earlier, these data assets are being created by, you may own them, you may put them together and package them. But the real issue there, this is not about transfer of ownership. The derivatives markets are not built that way. What they're about is retaining ownership, but allowing the risk of the value of that asset to be traded. Because some people want more risk, some people want less risk. That's what these markets are about. And I think it's just the logical next step, if you will. Once you create the data assets, then, as Pat mentioned, there ought to be a way to more universally trade the assets.
Hey, thanks. Ed, what you guys have done is really kind of just nicely set up one of our solutions in one of our products in the finance initiative. And I'm going to jump over. I'm going to just maybe we go to the next slide real quick before I introduce Nancy and Alice. But basically, we have two solutions here in this space. The first one is just this data economic derivatives platform right now focused on outcomes-based agreements, but also started to look at what other things, and you'll hear some of those examples coming up pretty soon. Overall for our finance initiative, it's finance is really broad, and we've really just focused it in on these two solutions. And the other one really is this sort of what we call ATM, but it's all about data valuation. We call it the data economic valuation platform. And to talk, it's focused very much, on data, how much data is worth, like in a monetary sense, what companies are able to do with it. And to talk more about that, I'm actually going to bring on, I'm going to ask Alice and Nancy to join us and maybe do some quick intros. Alice, are you there?
I am. Nancy's name was first, so I was just going to let her go. But sure, I'll go first. Ark, I wanted to say great job too on explaining very complex concepts in I think, an incredibly understandable format. You did great. And every time I have a conversation with Lydia, and I feel like I get smarter. I accidentally created a big data company. I didn't set out to. I wanted to solve a problem of the spread of misinformation in specialty healthcare. I myself am a cancer survivor and the mom of an IVF success story. And because of science and technology, my first investors for a company we call MedAnswers were doctors. They agreed not only to invest in the company, but to answer our users' anonymous personal questions. And they asked us to create a mini health profile so that they could do a better job in answering their question with relevance. That created an incredible data set. And with a mere 60,000 users, because we also integrated genetics into our data, we are now sitting on 250 million data points. And I had no frame of reference as I was setting up to do a Series A round of funding to understand how to communicate the value of that asset to the market, to communicate who the potential buyers would be, and also just to have that framework of how do we package it and resell, the same data set, but in unique and compelling ways to venture capitalists who are evaluating market opportunity, to healthcare centers, to doctors themselves, trying to expand their service offering in specialty areas of healthcare, to marketers, who are trying to spend their money more wisely in various markets. So this has been an incredible project with Lydian going through the valuation process, and I'm excited for the next steps with Lydian to help us package them up and actually sell them. In particular, with allowing our users to participate in the economic upside. We fundamentally and ethically believe that we did not get into this business to, quote unquote, take their data and make money off of them. In particular, we operate in areas of healthcare in which out-of-pocket expenses can be exorbitant. And it excites us greatly for the opportunity to let them participate in the economic upside of the data set.
Hey, Alice, thanks so much. Hey, Nancy, I have a couple questions for you to follow up on that, but maybe you could introduce yourself first.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm a CFO by trade, and with most of my experience in technology companies and like Sertage implementing technology solutions. I'm also an active CPA and member of the CFO Leadership Council. This is a non-for-profit organization with chapters across the United States. So I worked on the technical accounting aspect of the finance vertical.
Hey, so Nancy, just speaking of that, what Alice kind of highlighted there were a couple of things. One is that, hey, her company just happened to be collecting all this data and kind of she discovered that it's worth a lot. There's a lot more things that they could be doing with their data that is maybe not a part of what they initially set out to do. And there's also this whole concept of like incentivizing users, driving all these other revenue streams for their data. So, thinking about it from an accounting perspective and the work that we've been doing, I'm going to let you just take it from there and talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So based on what everyone's heard so far, it would make sense that companies should be able to capitalize their data as a new asset class, and it should sit on their balance sheet just like the other assets. So many companies' market cap is based on the perception of value of the data that they have or the data they're able to generate, and not just big companies like Facebook and Google, as you can see here. It's therefore incongruent that the actual recorded value of the assets on their balance sheet, which is missing this new asset class because they can't capitalize data assets under current US GAAP. Many smaller companies like MedAnswers are, as you see, sitting on a wealth of information that is potentially very valuable. As companies are able to develop markets for their data, generate revenue from them. It only makes sense that they should be able to capitalize this new asset class as it's minted. Appreciated that reference to manufacturing. Doing so basically opens up opportunities for companies to do things like obtain secured debt financing using the data asset as collateral.
And so, Nancy, what does that road look like? You know, getting this is, I imagine, getting a GAAP rules change is not a small thing.
No, it certainly isn't. It's definitely not a short road, but it is a path that's well established and it's worth pursuing. US GAAP does allow asset appreciation. We just need to evolve it a little bit further. Currently, US GAAP does evolve based on business needs and business cases. It does need to adapt to what's happening in the market today. Right now, I'm working closely with the Lydian team to develop the right tools and products to track value and revenue back to uniquely identified data assets. So we're also working with partners like MedAnswers that have valuable data to not only help monetize, but track it back and move the needle on the accounting standards. We've worked with some technical accounting experts in this area. The goal here is essentially to develop an accounting treatment for data as a new asset class and to have that recognized by the FASB. And that stands for Financial Accounting Standards Board. So essentially, they're the ones that we need to partner with first. So what I find particularly interesting and fun as a CFO is imagine a world where your balance sheet just increased by the value of your data assets and how that affects your current ratio, which is essentially a key to unlocking access to working capital.
Hey, thanks so much, Nancy. You know, I'm going to use that you know what you're talking about there. You know, increasing access to working capital. You know, we're also doing some work in other industries where there's a huge need for that, and there could be a huge impact from the value of like data assets, the opportunities to do that. And to talk a little bit more about that, I want to introduce Abhinav and Vipin, who've been kind of leading this initiative.
Hey, thanks, Sataj. My name is Abhinav Goyal, and I've also been a technology consultant in the past, and more recently I've spent a considerable amount of time running a manufacturing business. Over the last year, we've identified this industrials and manufacturing initiative for data economics company, and the goal really is to help companies in this industrial and capital goods sector to kind of leverage their data and develop data economic solutions. Some of the challenges that companies in this sector have are complex and non-transparent supply chains and operations. They also face heavy regulation and commodity price fluctuations. And they're constantly facing pressure to reduce cost, but also lengthen their cash flow cycles. So we really come up with three key solutions to tackle these challenges. One is on material traceability to open up some of those transparency issues. Industrial finance, where the idea, is for companies to be able to use all the data and the data assets that they have on their balance sheet to leverage that for financial instruments. And then finally, on the compliance side, how do we stay compliant on the waste and the recycling of the entire product life cycle that manufacturing generates? I'd like to pass it off to Vipin to introduce himself, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the lead industry that we're using as a showcase to develop these solutions. Vipin, you're on mute. Sounds like Vipin is not here with us. I'll quickly run it over. So we're using lead as a primary example for the metal traceability platform because it's a very hazardous material, and there are a lot of countries that don't know how to handle lead. India is one of them, and I met Vipin through his company that was developing a clean tech to recycle lead acid batteries in India. India has a large problem with an informal sector of lead recycling, where lead is recycled in the backyards of people's homes, and the lead just gets seeped into the ground. So India has certain rules to handle this lead, but it's not well implemented. So we wanted to approach it from a data economics incentive platform to help the country move forward in this space. And some of the areas that Vipin also identified are, finance problems for some of these small players in this market. And if they could leverage some of their data to access finance, it helps move some of these problems ahead. So really, the industrial problem platform is going to provide kind of like this integrated software infrastructure around tracking, traceability, and of course, financial leverage on data in their supply chains.
I just wanted to chime in that we actually do have Vipin. He's having some technical difficulties, but he's here with us in spirit.